In today's video, we're going to be looking at US employment, what happened at the ECB monetary policy decision, and a little bit on the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. Hello and welcome to another acysecurities market update. My name is Alistair Schultz and I'm going to be your host through today's trading journey. The first thing I'm looking at today is really just giving you guys a general gist of what's gone on overnight. The euro was up, the pound was down, and the yuan remained the same. So it gives you an idea that we are dealing with a bit of a mixed moment in time, with some markets down, others up, and obviously others not moving too much at all. Now, when we look at it other ways, what happened at the ECB monetary policy decision last night? We're all expecting to hear a lot from Christine Lagarde, and we're really looking to see if she would take the same sort of stance that Mario Draghi, her predecessor, did. Now, she was positive but cautious in her statements. Rates remained unchanged, and of course, she's not targeting an FX rate, which is really what we're looking for. There were concerns about the euro getting too high in value, and it is still sitting up near the 120 mark, just below really in relation to it. Of course, in the past, we've seen it hit as high as 1.25 before we see any action. Nonetheless, they were saying that they were going to keep an eye on what things were going on. Either way, the sentiment is that there's not really going to be too much monetary policy easing to come in the immediate term. My estimates are that we are likely going to have to see something happen before the end of the year. Regardless of all that, Christine Lagarde did a good job. She is still sitting on the fence about the recovery, though, like I said before, she is positive about the situation, though she is still going to remain cautious for the time being. Now, moving on and having a look at what's gone on with the NASDAQ and the S&P 500, both are down. We have seen a 2% drop on the NASDAQ, a 2.1% drop at its maximum on the S&P 500, though right now it's resting at about 1.8%. And the big question is really starting to play into minds of people. Investors are thinking about what happens if the big guys start selling this. Obviously, we've seen investors holding on and riding this wave up, or the rally up, if you will. But of course, we're now getting to a point where these valuations, especially on tech companies, are getting a little bit lofty. And we might decide that some people might decide to cash in and put some of that money in the bank. Now, if that happens, we might get some large scale selling happening. I still anticipate that we are likely to see some shorts happening in the near future, and I'm certainly not the only one. Now, moving on today, we've heard a little bit out of the US. It's not all bad news, but it's all not good news either. So what we've heard is that the unemployment rate has stayed the same. The data figures that we really saw has remained steady. Now that implies that job losses are remaining persistent and probably permanent, which means until we do get more stimulus and that we can get economy starting to grow, that inflation running hot, we aren't likely to get much improvement. Of course, we've got a stalemate though on the stimulus as well. Even though we have a reduced or a slimmed down package being planned, we have a split between the lawmakers at the moment who are unable to come to an agreement. This has been ongoing for a number of weeks, and we've heard from many people within the White House saying they're trying to get it through, but it's just not happening right now. So if this doesn't go through soon enough, that stimulus money is going to run out very quickly, and we might end up seeing more job losses come. Now, moving on, Brexit. This is another one tough contender for this week. I've written a bit of a blog on what's going on with Brexit this week and what the 4 outgoing scenarios I see going forward are. Of course, feel free to check that out. I'm pretty sure it's on Forex Factory now, and there are on a number of other places you can source that information, including the ACY website. But regardless, we were looking forward to a meeting on Thursday and hoping that some level of an agreement would happen, like we've done so many times before. Unfortunately, the meetings have not really gone to plan. That has got a worsened scenario, and it is looking more and more likely that England might walk away, or the UK might walk away without a deal at all. Now, ideally, we're hoping for a free trade agreement, but that's looking like an impossible scenario. And instead, we might see something that looks a little bit more like the deal that Australia has with Europe or Canada has with Europe. Of course, the absolute worst case scenario is they walk away without any deal at all, and they're going to be starting from scratch. So keep those in mind, especially if you're trading the pound in the next couple of days. Now, looking at the Bank of Canada, this was an overnight thing that came out. They didn't change much going on, but they did signal that they could do more stimulus for as long as is needed. Of course, that doesn't mean they necessarily will, and this does look a little bit like they're jawboning. So We might have seen things like that before in the past, and I'd be a little bit wary about whether they are going to do it or whether they aren't. I'm more important to look at if they actually do. I don't think they will before the end of the year though, so keep an eye on that one. It's an interesting piece to look at moving forward. Now, for the news ahead of tonight, we've obviously had a pretty big week on news. Tonight is no different, though there isn't any major events coming out. The first thing to look at is that we have Euro for European news. We have CPI and WPI coming out later in the evening. We also have stuff coming out of the UK with GDP, trade, manufacturing, and services all being affected. That data might be a little bit interesting because it might provide enough of an impact combined to move price around. Of course, we then have Eurogroup meetings, but those are a tentative thing. There's no scheduled announcement for when data might come out. So if you are trading the euro, be wary of that. They might make an unscheduled release and you might need to keep an eye very closely on what's happening there. We've also got US CPI coming out, and then a bit later on in the evening, later in the session, we have the US federal budget data numbers being released. So a couple of things to look at, nothing too major that we don't already know, but either way, you never know what's going to come out unscheduled at the moment. So please keep an eye on your data feeds and see where things are coming from. Now, if there's anything from today's video, perhaps one of my webinars, or in fact, you just might have a question you want to get past me, feel free to shoot me an email at talk2al@acy.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this video so you can get more great content from me and ACY Securities in the future. Have a great trading day ahead.